passive control to keep you within the lines of the story they wrote. A story where they're the hero, and you're just the supporting role. But once you start rewriting the script, when you stop needing their approval, the mask begins to crack. They won't always lash out. That's too obvious. Instead, they'll weaponize subtlety, a backhanded compliment, a dismissive glance, a seed of doubt whispered in a moment of vulnerability. Why? Because your growth is a mirror and they can't stand what it reflects. Your emotional intelligence threatens their illusion. Your mental clarity disrupts their control. This video will reveal exactly what narcissists do when they realize you've become too strong to manipulate, and more importantly, how to stay rooted in your truth when they try to flip the script. You're not too much. You're just finally seeing clearly. Let's begin. Most people will celebrate your growth. A true friend will clap when you rise. A wise partner will admire the way you evolve. But a narcissist, they see your strength not as beauty but as betrayal. To them, your empowerment is a direct threat. Not because you've done anything wrong, but because they were never interested in you. They were only interested in who you were when you were easier to control. When you begin reclaiming your voice, setting boundaries, speaking your truth, refusing to settle, they don't see this as maturity. They see it as rebellion. It shakes the toxic power dynamic they've so carefully constructed. Emotional clarity is dangerous to those who profit from your confusion. Let's break this down. In toxic relationships, narcissists rely on emotional confusion to dominate. They subtly train you to second-guess your instincts. Are you sure that happened? You're just being sensitive. You've changed, and not in a good way. Notice how none of those phrases are grounded in fact. They're all built to destabilize your mental clarity. And here's where the trap gets deeper. They don't want to fight you directly because they'll lose. Instead, they gaslight you into fighting yourself. Take Sarah, for example, a successful marketing executive who finally started standing up to her emotionally manipulative husband. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't make threats. She simply started saying no. No to emotional blackmail. No to last-minute guilt trips. No to conversations that spun in circles and ended in tears. His response: he didn't yell. He didn't even argue. He just got quiet, colder, more confused about who she was becoming. That's the strategy. Withhold affection. Delay responses. Drop cryptic comments like, "I don't even know who you are anymore. I miss the old you." Translation: I miss the version of you who accepted less. This isn't random, it's calculated. Because once you stop relying on them for validation, their influence begins to fade. And they know it. Your growth starves their illusion of power. But this is where many people fall back. Because you feel the tension, you notice the shift, and your old conditioning kicks in the need to smooth things over, to be nice, to not upset them. And just like that, you begin dimming your light again. You play small, not because you're weak, but because you were trained to associate strength with conflict. Here's the truth no one tells you. They are more afraid of your strength than you are of their silence. Because your strength is no longer reactive, it's rooted, it's calm. It doesn't need to shout, it just is. And when a narcissist can't manipulate you, they have no strategy left. So they panic. but in a quiet way, a subtle way, the way that leaves you doubting whether anything is really wrong at all. So the next time you feel that eerie silence after setting a boundary, pay attention. The chill in their voice, the compliment with a hidden jab, the way your victory is met with indifference. That's not love. That's fear, fear of losing their grip. And your only job in that moment, don't flinch. You are not here to ease their discomfort at the cost of your evolution. You're here to lead yourself forward with clarity, emotional resilience, and unapologetic self-worth. When you're no longer reacting, defending, or shrinking, the narcissist doesn't vanish. They simply evolve. They switch tactics. This is where the real psychological warfare begins. At this point, you've stopped chasing validation. You're showing up with inner strength, high standards, and emotional intelligence. But they don't push back with fire. They push back with fog. They twist things, not to destroy you directly, but to make you question yourself just enough. Let's say you share a win. You just launched a new business. You got promoted. You started therapy. You feel more grounded than ever. What do? They smile, faintly. Then they change the subject, or they mutter, "Just don't forget who helped you get there." Or worse, hope it's not another one of your little phases. It's not an argument. It's a seed of doubt they hope will grow into self-sabotage. This is not emotional feedback. It's emotional manipulation. When they can't control your actions, they'll try to control your perception of yourself. Let's go back to Sarah. After months of standing tall and setting personal boundaries, she felt confident for the first time in years. Her circle started to grow. Her energy shifted. Her decisions no longer revolved around someone else's approval. But the narcissist didn't rage. He recruited. He started telling mutual friends, "She's just different lately." Not in a good way. He planted questions. "Do you think she's okay? Ever since she started this self-help stuff, she's not the same. I miss the version of her who cared." It's subtle. It's underhanded. It's a calculated smear campaign, one built to erode her reputation just enough to isolate her. Because here's their fear. If others start seeing you as powerful, the narcissist loses their narrative. And without a narrative, they lose control. This tactic is called covert sabotage. And it's not about destroying your progress outright. It's about slowing it down with confusion, guilt, and passive disapproval. They want you to explain yourself, feel guilty for outgrowing them, water down your goals to keep the peace. And that's when you start shrinking again, if you're not careful. But here's the truth. You don't owe anyone a version of yourself that you've outgrown. If they can't celebrate your growth, that's on them, not you. High-performance thinking requires high-quality boundaries. Let them be uncomfortable. Let them misread your strength as arrogance. Let them call your peace distance. Because when you shift into executive mindset, when you no longer seek permission to evolve, you stop playing their emotional game altogether. Here's what strong people do. They document the patterns. They stay grounded in facts. They lead themselves through emotional fog with clarity and logic. You do not argue with manipulation. You don't explain growth to someone invested in your stagnation. You rise anyway. So when the narcissist goes quiet, or worse, begins quietly dismantling your name behind your back, recognize it for what it is: a desperate act from someone who realizes their control is slipping. And your job: stay grounded, stay clear, stay unshakable. You are not becoming too much. You are becoming who you were always meant to be. When strength becomes your new baseline, narcissists shift from subtle sabotage to something darker. They flip the script, and they do it so well. You might not even notice it at first. Suddenly, you're the one who's changed. You're the one who's cold, selfish, difficult. They say it not in rage, but in disappointment. Like a teacher scolding a student who used to have potential. Let me be clear, this is not an accident. It's a tactic and one of the most effective forms of gaslighting. If they can't control the situation, they'll try to control the story about it. Let's take a real-world example. Meet David. For years, David bit his tongue around his narcissistic brother. He kept the peace, never challenged the manipulation, never outshone him, even when he had every right to. But something shifted. David started building a successful business. He stopped attending family events that drained him. He stopped explaining his every move. And just like that, the story flipped. Now David was too busy. Arrogant. Not the same anymore. His brother, suddenly the misunderstood victim. He thinks he's better than us now. He doesn't care about family anymore. Ever since that promotion, he's become impossible. See what happened. The truth that David had grown into boundaries and peace was reframed as betrayal. That's the danger of a flipped narrative. It doesn't need to be true. It just needs to be loud enough to make you doubt yourself. And if you're not grounded in your own reality, you'll fall into their trap. You'll over-explain. You'll apologize for things you didn't do. You'll try to prove you're still good. But here's the hard truth. If someone weaponizes your growth to paint you as the villain, they were never rooting for you. This is not feedback. This is control disguised as concern. Emotional intelligence means knowing the difference between real connection and subtle control. So, what do you do when they flip the script? You don't play the role they've cast for you. You refuse the part. Let them say, "You've changed." Say, "Yes, I've evolved." Let them say, "You're being dramatic." Say nothing. Let your peace be the response. Let them say, "You used to be more fun." Smile. You've traded fun for freedom. Because when you're grounded in self-trust, the story they spin doesn't hold weight. Instead of fighting to rewrite their version of events, anchor yourself in your truth. Write it down. Speak it with calm confidence. Rehearse it not for them, but for yourself, so that when the smear campaign comes, you won't be caught off guard. This is emotional resilience at its core. Not reacting, not shrinking, not performing for approval, but standing in quiet certainty that your life no longer revolves around someone else's inability to grow with you. Remember this: clarity is power. The clearer you are about who you are and what you stand for, the harder it is for anyone to rewrite your story. Let the narcissist rewrite. Spin. Perform. You keep becoming. Because the more you evolve, the more irrelevant their script becomes. And eventually, The audience stops clapping for their act. They don't always scream. They don't need to. Because when a narcissist sees you stepping into your power, they don't push back with force. They pull back with subtle emotional sabotage. It starts small. A shift in energy. You walk into the room, excited about something, and they go quiet. You share good news, and they change the subject. You express a boundary, and they pause. Just long enough to make you wonder, did I do something wrong? That pause, that silence, that sudden coldness, it's not nothing. It's control in disguise. They don't need chaos to dominate you. They just need you to doubt your own clarity. This is how narcissists create mental fog without ever raising their voice. It's the look that lasts half a second too long. The joking comment that cuts too deep. The "I'm just trying to help" disguised as a dagger. And if you're someone with a high level of emotional intelligence, this confusion hits harder. Why? Because you're constantly scanning for harmony. You care about connection. You think deeply. But here's the truth. Emotional confusion is a design, not a side effect. Let's say you bring up something that hurt you. Instead of listening, they shift the conversation. I don't remember it that way. You're being too sensitive. Are you sure that happened? What just happened isn't gaslighting by accident. It's precision warfare. Their goal isn't clarity. It's distortion. To keep you so busy second-guessing your reality, you stop trusting your own emotional compass. This is where many high achievers fall prey, especially those driven by mental performance and emotional harmony. You've been trained to be fair, to take responsibility, to consider the other side. But in narcissistic dynamics, that becomes your weakness. They'll exploit it. And here's where it becomes truly dangerous. You start asking them to confirm your experience. Did that really happen? Was I being rude? Am I overreacting? You no longer trust your instincts, you outsource them. And in doing so, you hand over the very power they were after all along. Clarity is currency, and if they can bankrupt you emotionally, they can control your perception. So what's the antidote? One word: documentation. Not for them, for you. Write it down. What happened? How you felt? What was said? What shifted? Because narcissists are masters at rewriting history, and if you don't have a map back to your truth, their fog becomes your new normal. Also, pay attention to patterns. A healthy person will clarify misunderstandings. A narcissist will multiply them. You'll see the difference in how they respond when you express something real. One listens, the other deflects, denies, or attacks. And the longer you tolerate that confusion, the more you'll begin to adapt to it like it's normal. Confusion is not a personality flaw, it's a survival response in toxic environments. Real example: imagine you've started meditating daily, working out, setting new standards. You share a goal. I'm thinking of starting my own project, and they reply, "Oh, that's ambitious. Do you really think you're ready for that?" They didn't say no. They didn't encourage you either. They just planted a seed of doubt. That seed grows in silence. It sounds like your own voice, but it's not yours. So what do? You stop playing by emotional manipulation rules. You ground yourself. You stay factual. You say, "I don't need this to make sense to you. I need it to make sense to me. You affirm, I trust what I feel. I trust what I saw. I trust my own growth. Because that's the worst fear of a narcissist, a person who trusts their own mind. Here's the truth no one likes to admit. When a narcissist sees they can no longer control you, they go for the next best thing. They control how others see you. They start with whispers, a raised eyebrow, a concerned comment to a mutual friend I don't know. They've changed lately. I'm just worried. It's subtle. It's strategic. And it's not about truth, it's about perception. Because when your confidence becomes unshakable, when you stop asking for their permission or validation, they can no longer shape your reality. So they shift tactics. Instead of controlling you, they try to control the room around you. They'll say, he's not who he used to be. She's so full of herself now. I just miss the old version, before all this growth stuff. Notice the framing. You're not growing, you're becoming arrogant. You're not evolving, you're changing for the worse. And they'll make sure just enough people hear that. Why? Because isolation is power. If they can make people question your motives, they can re-establish dominance indirectly. They'll even cherry-pick moments. A boundary you set now seen as cold. A no you said framed as selfish. Your silence, passive, aggressive. When they can't win by controlling you, they try to win by controlling the lens through which others view you. Let me give you a real-world example. You finally walk away from a toxic dynamic. No drama, no explosion, just quiet, self-respect. And days later, mutual friends stop calling. You get weird vibes at work. Someone you trusted pulls away without explanation. Why? Because the narcissist didn't come for you directly, they came for your reputation. And they didn't lie outright. They implied. They spun. They framed. They'll say things like, I don't want to speak badly. But you didn't hear it from me. But I just wish they would go back to who they used to be. This tactic is called a smear campaign, and it's not about facts. It's about planting emotional seeds of mistrust, because if others start doubting your integrity, you may start doubting it too, and that's the goal, to isolate you enough that you start asking, am I really the problem? This is why emotional clarity and self-anchoring are vital. You need to know who you are, what you stand for, what your truth is, so that when the narrative around you starts to bend, you don't bend with it. A narcissist's smear campaign only works if you hand over your voice. So, how do you respond? Here's the Stoic answer: you don't. You stay silent. You stay grounded. You let your actions speak. Because people who truly know you, they'll see the truth. And those who believe the false version without asking you directly, they were never in your corner to begin with. Let the narcissist twist the script. Let them gather spectators. Let them perform. You stay focused on becoming untouchable, on building your inner fortress. That's executive mindset. That's emotional intelligence. That's power. In the end, their story loses traction because it's based on fear, on control, on illusion. Yours, built on truth, built on stillness, built on peace, and peace. My friend, that's the loudest power you'll ever carry. A narcissist's most dangerous weapon isn't rage, it's confusion. They don't have to attack you. They just have to make you question your reality. And the most brilliant part, you often won't even realize it's happening until you're lost in the fog. You bring up something that bothered you, they reply. I don't remember it happening that way. You're overreacting. You're being too sensitive. Now you're second-guessing what you felt, what you saw, what you know. Welcome to gaslighting, the narcissist's psychological war tactic. It doesn't start with a bang. It starts with a subtle shift in tone. When you speak, passive, aggressive comments wrapped in just joking. Denial of previous conversations you clearly remember. One day they build you up. The next, they go silent. And when you ask what's wrong, nothing. You're imagining things. You check your messages again. You replay the conversation in your mind. You wonder, did I misinterpret that? You didn't. But that's the game. To make you doubt your instincts so deeply that you rely on them to interpret reality. And once that happens, they own you. This confusion is not accidental. It's a high-performance manipulation strategy, because when you're emotionally foggy, you're vulnerable. You're distracted. You're too busy questioning yourself to see the bigger picture. Let me give you a real-world example. You set a boundary: I don't want to be yelled at during arguments. They respond calmly. They nod. Then, a week later, they raise their voice again. When you remind them of the boundary, I never agreed to that. You're exaggerating. It wasn't yelling. You feel crazy. Not because you are, but because their entire strategy is designed to make you feel that way. Confusion isn't love. It's control disguised as care. Let's be clear. In a healthy relationship, communication brings clarity. It resolves, aligns, and heals. But in a toxic one, communication is a maze. You exit the conversation more lost than when you entered it, because the goal is not connection, it's domination through mental fatigue. Here's what you'll start to notice. Every time you speak your truth, the topic mysteriously shifts. Every time you express hurt, the spotlight turns on you. Every time you make progress, something just happens to knock you off balance. Coincidence? No. It's control through chaos. Because as long as you're spinning, you're not growing. You're not rising. You're not a threat. So what's the solution? Clarity. You journal. You document. You anchor yourself in facts, not feelings twisted by their words. You stop explaining yourself to those who twist your voice. You stop justifying your emotions to someone invested in invalidating them. You repeat this mantra: if it feels like I'm losing myself just to keep someone else, I'm already paying too high a price. True freedom begins not when they finally understand you, but when you finally stop needing them to. You reclaim your thoughts. You honor your instincts. You make peace your non-negotiable, and when the fog clears, you'll realize the confusion wasn't because you were unstable. It was because you were waking up. The moment you start to rise is the exact moment a narcissist will rewrite the script. You're no longer quiet, agreeable, easy to manage. Now you're difficult. Now you're dramatic. Now you're not who you used to be. But let's be clear, this is not a diagnosis. It's a defense mechanism, because your growth doesn't fit the role they wrote for you. And when you stop acting in their play, They flip the entire story. You set a boundary, now you're being cold. You say no, now you're selfish. You speak your truth, now you're attacking them. It's twisted, but calculated. They make your healing look like a betrayal. And that's the trap. Real life example. Let's say you finally tell a narcissistic friend, "I don't feel comfortable when you constantly criticize my choices." At first, they nod. They may even say, "I understand. I'll be more mindful." But give it a few days. You'll notice a shift. Suddenly, they go quiet around you. They joke with others but give you short answers. You bring up something exciting, they change the subject. Then comes the accusation. You've changed. You're not fun anymore. You've become so distant. I miss the old you. This isn't about missing the real you. It's about missing the version of you they could control. The more you grow, the more uncomfortable they get. But instead of facing their own insecurity, they point fingers at you. Why this tactic works? Because it hits where it hurts. Your desire to be seen as kind, your tendency to maintain harmony, your emotional intelligence which they exploit, not respect. They know you'll reflect, you'll overthink, you'll spiral into, "Did I go too far? Maybe I am being selfish. Maybe I should soften my stance." That's not guilt. That's conditioning. And if you fall for it, you start shrinking again. You dim your light to make them comfortable, but ask yourself this: why is your peace threatening to them? If your self-worth disturbs someone, they were never rooting for you. They were rooting for your dependence. High-performance insight, emotional intelligence is a boundary, not a weakness. You're not dramatic. You're not cold. You're not the villain. You're just no longer willing to entertain toxicity in the name of keeping the peace. Apologize for taking up space. Filter your truth to protect someone else's insecurity. That's not cruelty. That's leadership. And yes, some people will hate you for it, especially narcissists, because your independence breaks their illusion of control. They don't know how to interact with someone who doesn't need them, so they rewrite the narrative to preserve their ego. But here's the secret: you don't have to participate in the drama to destroy the illusion. Just rise. Calmly, quietly, consistently. The more you honor your truth, the more their version of the story loses power. When your strength becomes undeniable and their grip on you begins to fade. A narcissist doesn't just fight harder, they fight smarter, silently, strategically. They start seeding doubt in the minds of those around you. "She's changed lately. Don't you think he's just not the same anymore? I'm worried." They're acting distant. Maybe it's that new job or new therapist. It's subtle, it's calculated, it's dangerous. Because now, you're not only battling your own internal clarity, you're managing external perception. This is psychological warfare, and the narcissist plays it well. Real-life example. You walk into a room, something feels off. People you used to joke with now avoid eye contact. Conversations quiet down when you enter. Someone says, "I heard you've been going through some stuff. Hope you're okay." You never told them anything, but someone did. Not with facts, but with concerned comments wrapped in fake empathy. Why? Because if the narcissist can't control you, They'll try to control how the world sees you. They'll retell your story, edit the script, and cast themselves as the misunderstood hero while painting you as the confused villain. It's not about facts. It's about narrative control. Why it feels so isolating. When you evolve, people expect you to stay the same. When you rise, they expect you to carry everyone's comfort. And when you finally say no, they call you selfish. But here's the truth. You are not selfish for outgrowing a role that was suffocating you. Still, when mutual friends, co-workers, or even family members begin pulling away, you question yourself. Maybe I am changing too much. Maybe I should tone it down. Maybe they're right. But that voice in your head, that whisper of doubt, didn't come from you. It was planted. The narcissist doesn't need you to break. They just need you to slow down, to question, to hesitate, to ask for validation from the very people they've already poisoned. That's how they regain access to your energy. High-performance insight reputation is influence, but integrity is power. They may win temporary influence over others, but you hold something far more potent, self-trust. And when you build an unshakable core, a foundation rooted in clarity, values, emotional intelligence, and executive mindset, no rumor can crack it. People may gossip. They may question you. Let them. Because over time, lies reveal themselves. Patterns emerge. And the people meant for you will see through the fog. You don't need to fight fire with fire. You don't need to explain your growth to those committed to misunderstanding it. What you need is stillness. Stillness is your strategy. Because while they talk, spin, and scramble, you rise. You build. You lead. You become untouchable. You've spent months, maybe years, shrinking, doubting, second-guessing every word, every decision, every boundary. Not because you were weak, but because someone trained you to mistrust yourself, so they could trust they were still in control. But then something shifted. Not all at once, not loudly, but quietly, powerfully. You began to listen to that voice inside. You started writing your own narrative, and you finally asked, what if I'm not the problem? That moment, that's the beginning of psychological liberation. What it looks like in real life. You tell someone no, and they push back hard. Before, you'd explain, you'd soften, you'd over-justify. Now you just repeat it, no, and walk away. You get called difficult. You get labeled cold. You hear whispers, you've changed. But instead of spiraling, you smile. Because you have changed. And that's the point. The trap was never just control, it was doubt. Narcissists don't want you to fight. They want you to freeze, to keep running everything through their lens until your reality becomes theirs. That's why they question your memory, your emotions, your motives. Because if you start trusting your own perception, their illusion collapses. The moment you stop asking, am I too much, and start saying, I'm just enough for the life I'm building, you win. Stoic wisdom, truth needs no audience. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, the opinion of 10,000 men is of no value if none of them know the truth. In other words, you do not need public approval to validate private truth. You don't owe the old version of yourself to anyone, especially not those who only loved you because you were easy to manipulate. Let them think you're cold. Let them say you've changed. That's not your burden. That's their reflection. When you prioritize mental clarity, when you value emotional intelligence more than appeasement, when you invest in high-performance inner peace instead of chaotic relationships, you no longer chase closure. You no longer explain your evolution. You simply lead yourself forward. That's executive mindset. That's luxury emotional intelligence. That's the energy narcissists can't penetrate. Because your worth is no longer a negotiation. It's a non-refundable fact. Let them talk. You're busy building. While they gossip, you're building character. While they spin narratives, you're anchoring your integrity. While they scramble for control, you walk in quiet power, a power they can no longer touch. So the next time you hear you've changed, say, yes, and I'm proud of it, because your story is no longer written by manipulation. It's authored by resilience. And when the script is no longer theirs to flip, the game is over. At first, they thought you were just going through a phase, a temporary rebellion, a passing moment of defiance. They underestimated the quiet force building inside you, the slow, deliberate transformation of someone reclaiming their dignity, boundaries, and clarity. They expected you to fold, to flinch, to apologize for becoming more, but instead, you became the one thing they feared the most, a person who no longer needs them. See, a narcissist thrives in dependency, not love, not respect, but dependence. If you need their approval, their validation, their affection, then they have power. But the moment you break that link, when your self-worth becomes internal rather than outsourced, the game ends. And that's when they panic. They sense it in your posture, in the way your eyes no longer scan the room for their reaction, in your silence that no longer seeks peace but asserts it. They feel the shift, and they hate it, because you're no longer manageable. You're no longer theirs. You've stepped outside the cage and set it on fire behind you. This isn't rage. It's clarity. It's that razor-sharp moment when the fog lifts and you realize that everything you were taught to believe about love, loyalty, and sacrifice was just manipulation in disguise. And you're done. Not with bitterness, but with boundaries. That's what makes you dangerous. Not loud, not aggressive, but unshakable, stoic, emotionally intelligent, grounded in self-respect, a walking contradiction to their script. They want you to perform, you observe. They want a reaction, you respond with silence. They want control, you offer detachment. And now, for the first time, they're forced to face a version of you they can't twist, bait, or exploit. You're no longer playing defense. You're not trying to prove you're good, worthy, or innocent. You simply are, and in that certainty, you've become untouchable. Real strength doesn't shout. It simply is. And the person who once shrank in the face of conflict now walks through storms with eyes wide open, because you've realized the storm was never out there. It was always within you, waiting to be reclaimed. You don't need revenge. You don't need closure. You don't even need them to understand. You just need to keep walking toward peace, toward purpose, toward people who recognize your value without needing to break you first. So, if you've ever wondered what real power looks like, look in the mirror. It's in your stillness, in your decision not to chase, not to argue, not to explain. It's in the quiet dignity of a person who knows. You don't have to fight to win, you just have to stop playing their game. That's not just growth. That's revolution. And for the narcissist who fed on your doubt for years, that's the end. Stay grounded. Stay free. You are the storm they never saw coming. You are no longer someone they can silence. You are no longer someone who bends just to keep the peace. And that's terrifying for them. Because when a narcissist sees that you are no longer reactive, no longer dependent on their validation, and no longer living under the illusion they created,